Well, good morning. As Lloyd mentioned, XPrize was here at the last meeting to talk about our carbon initiatives that we are pursuing. I want to talk to you about that today. I don't want to repeat what Jim went over. For a lot of you that were here at the last meeting, that would be repetitive and perhaps not as interesting. In my role at TriState and with our initiative, I'm really focused on the communications aspects and the storytelling and the work that we need to do to really call it evangelize the notion that we can do something different with carbon. Don mentioned last night he believes in clean coal technology. We do as well. But we have to inform regulators, policymakers. We've got to inform the public. We need to work within our own circles to have a vision that there are solutions available for the challenges we have with fossil fuels, whether it's natural gas, whether it's coal, that there is a tremendous opportunity before us to think differently about carbon, about the fuels we use, the way we use them, the value that we get out of them. And we're very excited, and I'll talk about our perspectives on this and how we got where we are. Let me first just say that I'm getting to know a number of you, and I appreciate that. I greatly appreciate the work of the Infrastructure Authority, Governor Meade and his leadership, the legislative leadership, all of the interests in Wyoming that have looked at the work that we would really like to push forward and have come and are supporting us. It's important. We're really, I think, capturing the imagination of folks around the country and across the planet, really, about where there's opportunities to stimulate industries around carbon utilization, carbon management. So that's what I'll talk about today. A little bit about me. I worked for the electric cooperatives for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I personally really believe that we need to work as hard as we can to support our rural communities. Working for a co-op, that is truly in my heart. I value the cooperatives and their mission to supply cost-based, not-for-profit consumer-owned power to the rural areas where, in a lot of cases, things aren't different today than they were when the Rural Electrification Act in the 1930s came forward. Rural communities are still challenged. They are still heavily energy dependent. The industries in our rural communities need affordable, reliable electricity. They need affordable, reliable fuels. And so we've got a very heartfelt position towards the industries that support the rural communities. I also believe in industry. I think that industry is worthy of trust. With that trust comes responsibility to look at some of the challenges before us, be able to react to that, be able to push forward solutions. And certainly the energy industry has a long history of doing that. The air is cleaner than ever before. Our water is cleaner than ever before. Good regulation combined with good performance from industry has made great strides. We do valuable work. That message needs to be out there. So that's sort of where I stand on things personally. Let me talk a little bit about TriState for those of you that aren't familiar with our organization. We are the not-for-profit wholesale power supplier to 44 electric cooperatives across the West. For some perspective, that's 200,000 square miles. It's 20% larger than the state of California, with a population roughly of that of Idaho. So we're in a really unique position in our role as a wholesale power supplier to these 44 cooperatives. We generate and transmit power across some of the most challenging geography in the country. It's a very difficult job, but one that we think we do well. But we have our challenges. Keeping power affordable is our biggest. The greatest threat that we see is the regulatory threat that comes with environmental regulations. So when we look at our jobs, really, at the end of the day, what TriState does is we manage risk. on behalf of our 44 member electric utilities. We manage the risks of operating power plants and transmission lines. We manage the market risks for buying and selling electricity, buying fuels. We manage the financial risk to capitalize our operations and run our operations. And we have to manage these regulatory risks. And of those risks, carbon is the great challenge that we face today. I think we can agree that carbon regulations are going to affect our industry. They already are. And we need to be positioned to be able to meet that challenge. That's not to say we're not going to push back, and regulation is not based on sound science, does not take costs into consideration. But it does mean that we are going to look at solutions as well. If you look at TriState in our portfolio, we're about 60% coal-based when it comes to the energy we provide our member electric cooperatives. About 20% of the energy we supply to our members comes from renewable resources, whether it's hydropower, wind, solar, recovered energy. And the remainder is from purchase contracts, and a small portion is natural gas. Our history has been one where we've taken full advantage of the value of coal. We've invested in coal, we've acquired or merged with other utilities that had assets in coal, and we've maintained those assets. We believe that coal has significant value in the West for affordable and reliable power. And in an environment where some utilities might be perceived for moving away from coal, we firmly defend our ability to use all of the fuels that are available to us. We want to be able to use coal, natural gas, hydropower, renewable energy. We want to be able to use all of those fuels responsibly, but we don't want to have options taken away from us, choices taken away from us, especially if that's happening in an arbitrary type fashion. So coal remains a very important resource to us today and in the future. In fact, in the past few years, we've acquired new coal assets. Colorado Mine in Colorado, we produce about 2 million tons annually that helps to power Craig Station in northwest Colorado. So that's not just talk, we really are making the investments to secure our fuel supply and be able to sustain our facilities and be able to manage our costs. We have another much smaller mine in southwest Colorado that feeds our nucleus station. That is a circulating fluidized bed plant that is among the lowest emitting mercury plants in the country. A very good facility. My point in mentioning this is when I talk about coal, we talk about options around carbon. It's not just the people that we serve, the communities we serve, the industries we serve that need affordable and reliable power. But it's also the people that live in these communities where we have coal-based power plants, where we have coal mines, that really rely on us to help sustain their livelihoods. When you look at just the numbers from those two plants in Colorado, there's $500 million worth of induced economic activity because we have these plants operating. That's meaningful. If you go into southwest Colorado, just north of Telluride, you get to the small towns of Newton and Arita. And these communities are absolutely tied to the mine and the power plant. Their tax base is tied to it. Most of their jobs are tied to it. It matters to them. In Craig, Colorado, that town is highly dependent on that power plant. If you even look at the welcome sign into town, there's a picture of the plant on the town. When we look at how we sustain our industry, sustain our use of coal, it matters to the people that work in the industry. And we take that to heart, that the work that we do to manage these risks really gets back to people's livelihoods, their aspirations, their children, and it's important work. So when it comes to carbon, just to show of hands, how many believe that we can manage carbon from fossil fuel plants, but there are technology opportunities. I agree with you. Do they exist today in a commercial scale that we can go and purchase and install? They don't. There's demonstration projects that the EPA is relying on for some new regulations that we have issue with. There's a lot of work that's going on, some of that we participate in. But as it stands today, we don't have the options that we need to be able to manage carbon. And in fact, we see the options that are available today having some real challenges. We are active with the Electric Power Research Institute and other efforts in carbon capture and sequestration, whether it's the We Energies plant in Wisconsin or the Mountaineer project in West Virginia. We have had a project in northwest Colorado at our track or mine, which is adjacent to our power plant. We share ownership with that with other utilities that participate in the power plant, where we have done a major sequestration assessment, working with the Department of Energy, the Colorado Geologic Survey, the University of Utah, and others. We're evaluating the soils, the geologic formations, to be able to permanently sequester sequester carbon across the West. We're pursuing those options, carbon capture and sequestration, but we don't think that that is sufficient for us as a risk management strategy. There's other things that we need to do. And one of the areas where we have specific interest is looking at where we can think differently. And the big push is really, can we transform carbon from a waste, a liability, into an asset, something that has value. In a sense, you think about it as the maturing of our industry. How do we take the full value out of the natural gas that we use for electricity, out of the coal that we use for electricity? It's a compelling question. If we can think differently about this, then we can approach the problem in a much different way. And there's a compelling story to be told there, particularly with the public, who I think right now don't share the belief that many of you have, that there is a solution. And when folks think about carbon and associate that with they perceive to be climate challenges, then the solution often is just don't do it. Find a different path, whether it's renewable energy, other resources, but you can no longer use fossil fuels. We think that we can. We think we can do that in a way that helps address the regulatory risks that we have when it comes to carbon and be able to move forward. To do that, we're just a small generation transmission cooperative out in the West. We essentially want to be able to go out and buy technology that will help us to manage carbon, whether that's a viable carbon capture and sequestration technology, a viable carbon utilization and recycling technology, or anything else. We need to have the options to be able to manage what is becoming a greater carbon risk. Yet we're never going to be serial number one on any new technology. It's tough for us. We're a not-for-profit cooperative. Our risk profile is fairly low. But we know that there are great ideas across the country, across the world. Great ideas of how to manage carbon, recycle carbon. Great ideas about how to get new ideas to commercialization. And we became, a number of years ago, very interested in the idea of open innovation. What can we do to help to link those that have ideas together with those that can capitalize those ideas, advance research, test technologies, co-develop technologies, and drive innovation towards commercial products? That's really what's in it for us. We want to be able to go and buy validated, tested, demonstrated technologies that can help us manage carbon. We think that our options are somewhat limited today. So there's a lot of discussion about open innovation. It's really not a new idea. This book from Henry Jethro was published in 2003. Bell Labs was doing open innovation within their ecosystem with others decades ago. The intranet in its development was a great example of open innovation. We've got a long history of collaboration to be able to find solutions. The challenge that I think we have with energy technology and carbon utilization in particular is that there really isn't an established infrastructure to be able to advance these ideas, get those commercialized. There's programs with DOE, with ARPA-E, out of our national laboratories, great work. But to date, the notion of carbon utilization has really been focused on enhanced oil recovery, which, while a very effective and demonstrated technologies, it has limited opportunities, either because of geography, resources, or in many cases, cost. So our goal with our carbon initiative is try to look at an open innovation model to drive, to facilitate, to help accelerate the path of innovation to commercialization. So what have we done? Well, we've begun to pull together research. We sat back and said, we really don't know much about this space. We understand enough to know that there are opportunities out there. What can we do? We've actually now created 4 volumes of syndicated research that begin to answer some of the questions that we had about how do you move forward. Going backwards, in 2013, we looked at commercialization, what the challenges are there, knowing that in previous years we looked at the value of test centers and how a test center might be created to help test these technologies, validate them for industry. We've looked at where there are opportunities, both in new ways to look at recycling carbon or novel technologies around carbon capture to be able to reduce the cost in terms of energy, in terms of water, in terms of dollars of being able to capture the carbon dioxide. And it's really set us on a path that we think has a tremendous amount of promise. Take carbon capture and recycling. This is a tremendous area of interest where there's a few major pathways that can begin to address how you recycle carbon. And all of these can lead to creating new fuels, animal feed, specialty chemicals, building materials, even the capture of carbon and graphene and the promise of carbon nanotubes and fullerenes and nanotechnology that can change the way we look at the materials that we produce. But there's a tremendous opportunity here. We've found that there's over 135 entities that are focused in these areas. Some are highly capitalized and doing great work. Some are really still just ideas looking to move forward. But what they do need is support to be able to move forward. We have found that some of the technical challenges that need to be overcome that industry can be helpful with include, in the case of biological processes, the year-round cycles and weather and temperature, the thermodynamic challenges that come with conversion of carbon dioxide and other materials. How do you scale up these technologies? There's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, and a lot of this work is expensive. It needs to have the support to get innovators the capital they need, the attention they need to be able to move forward and produce the technologies that industry will likely demand. At the end of the day, we need to scale these things up. We need to be able to move them forward as quickly as we can and resolve some of the penalties that come with operations like this, whether it's cost, water, or electricity use. We have gone and we've looked at carbon capture as well, recognizing that not all carbon recycling technologies can take flue gas directly from a power plant or industrial process and recycle that. but there's still a compelling need to have carbon capture technology available. And so we've identified 90 different entities that are involved with new approaches to carbon capture. Some of this work is supported by the National Energy Technology Laboratory, the Department of Energy, the ARPA-E program. Others are independently doing this work. But we see there's tremendous opportunity, again, that needs to be catalyzed, that needs to be supported, that will drive towards commercial products. That gets us to the notion of test centers and physical facilities. If we assume we have a network of interests, we have industry, we have innovators, we have all of the traditional infrastructure that you need in an incubation type activity, in an industry catalyzing approach we can see in any industry. The unique challenge that we have with carbon management and utilities is the need to be able to scale these technologies up and demonstrate them in a way that gives those prospective investors who would want to take that to the next level, utilities that would want to purchase, an opportunity to see the technology, kick the tires, so to speak, and be able to get a really good view towards what the options are. We're a fairly risk-averse industry, so having test centers, solution centers, commercialization centers is a big step towards being able to validate these technologies. Where does it provide value? Well, we need to get technology into real-world situations. We need to pull flue gas from power plants, run those through processes. That's not an easy thing to do for many innovators that would want to test at a power plant. I would say that there are many utilities that would rather not have additional equipment hooked up to their facilities and run the risk of having any kind of disruption of supply, disruption of their ongoing air permits, whatever it may be. There's some real risk there from the utility standpoint. Test centers can help to address deployment costs. If there's a test center that can make flue gas available, have electricity available, water supply available, be able to deal with other effluent, there's a real advantage to those that need to demonstrate technologies. There's also a community around the concept of a test center where many different entities could come, collaborate, share information, and that open innovation model begin to find linkages between different technologies, different processes, different ideas, and grow new innovation. Those facilities don't exist today, and perhaps some of that collaboration is harder to come by. So we think there's a tremendous role for integrated test centers, and we've done the research, I think, that backs that up and looks at other examples that show how these things can be possible and beneficial. So our view is that a integrated energy test center that would have a strong component in carbon utilization would be adjacent to a working power plant, that it would have access to those services that you would need, and that it would allow the demonstration in a very visible way of these technologies at a scale that would give industry and investors the confidence to be able to move forward. This is exciting to us. When you put the test center together with the potential for these innovators in the carbon utilization space and the carbon capture space, you begin to see this model of open innovation that brings in a lot of different elements. A lot of things that are already proven in the technology industries, whether it's dealing with data, software, hardware, telecommunications, bring those best lessons learned into the utility industry and be able to help these startups, these companies that need more assets than current infrastructure can provide, an opportunity to demonstrate the validity of their ideas, their commercial viability, and be able to move forward. So in our last volume, we really see this CO2 asset industry being able to develop and flourish, a new industry, so to speak, that kind of goes from the bottom up of education, storytelling, connecting people, getting some excitement around the possibility and the promise for carbon recycling, and really moving up to a commercialization pathway that includes test centers that's able to actually get this work done. We need this as a utility. We need to be able to have the option to purchase these technologies to better manage our risk. That's why we're excited about what's happening in Wyoming. This meeting, the work of Governor Bee, the legislative leadership, the infrastructure authority, and working with us, the vision to how we get this done. Like I said, we're a Western utility that's got real issues that we need to manage. We're developing the linkages that we think are necessary to spur this industry to move things forward. The energy plan for the state is really in line with, I think, the views that a lot of us share. It's not a prescriptive document. It really is a document, a plan that opens up opportunity, that looks at where the state's strengths are, where investments could be beneficial, and how we can move technology forward, use the resources we have, use them responsibly. We're very proud of our relationship with the state and very thankful for the governor and the legislative leadership for appropriating funds to help to move forward with a test center, working with the University of Wyoming. We're very optimistic that there is a great opportunity for this test center to move forward in the state, to draw on the entrepreneurial energy here, to draw on the expertise here, and to attract folks here from really across the world to look at these technologies and advance these technologies. And at the end of the day, sustain the resource development in a responsible way that drives the economy. And that's important. It's important to our utility, our member electric cooperatives that serve across Wyoming, the citizens that live here, the industries that operate here. We need to have a thriving industry. And I think carbon management is an important part of that strategy and that sustainment over time. So in the end, we're really looking at how in the state we can support this unconventional carbon capture and utilization technology, how we can drive those breakthroughs that are currently challenges for carbon capture and sequestration, and be able to have a test center that, among other things, could potentially host a competition among those players in the industry that have technologies, that have ideas, to help under this open innovation banner drive new ideas. We think that test centers combined with the networks, combined with an inducement prize, really can get some excitement and attention drawn to this opportunity. And when we can do that, it begins to feed on itself, draw the resources that it needs, draw the attention that it needs, work with regulators, work with government, work with industry to be able to find solutions, find those options. So in closing, what we're really focused on is this radical technology advancement. Can we, our collective work, look at a new idea and be able to move that forward? Can we support early stage technologies and innovators and move them forward as a community? Can we eventually demonstrate these technologies, scale that up, move ideas towards commercialization, and create the opportunities that utilities like TriState need to be able to continue to operate and manage those regulatory risks? We know we're not going to be able to do that alone. We need to have partners and a whole community of interests that want to see options available to manage carbon, that want to see solutions, and work with them, connect the linkages, and make this a robust effort. So we're excited about this. We're very thankful for everyone in Wyoming and all the folks that we work with and their enthusiasm towards this. And I thank you for your time. I think as you talk to your peers, talk to others, what my ask would be is that think about the opportunities to manage carbon and explore with others this idea of carbon utilization, carbon recycling. Talk to folks. Is this something that Does that make sense to you? Does that ring true? We can do these things if we all think in a different way about carbon, energy, environment. I encourage you to begin building that discussion with those that you know. We need to expand the view of what utilization is and could be, and move the ball forward. So, thank you very much.
Questions from the board?
I have a question.
We're going to take questions from the board first. Thank you.
Leo's interested in your review of technologies. Do you see anything that might be emerging in the next 5 to 10 years that would make a beneficial impact?
That's the question that we seek to solve. Thank you for thinking I know the answer to that, by the way. You know, when you look at carbon utilization technologies and those 3 major pathways, the scale issue, I think, is the real challenge. If you look at biological solutions, whether it's algae or bacteria, as we were just talking about, it's a tremendous challenge to be able to utilize those technologies to deal with all the different conditions that you need and be able to capture a significant part of flue gas. Catalysts are a very interesting area in the notion of being able to develop fuels, syngases, methane, you name it. If you can mature our technologies and create other fuels that displace energy, there's a tremendous opportunity there, and one can see the scale of those operations fitting in with the scale of the challenge. So we're very encouraged by a lot of the work that's being done, but all of it needs to be advanced and it needs to be demonstrated.
Other question?
Lee, is the research that you showed here, is that available for folks to somehow get their hands on and peruse and look at?
You can contact me and we can make some of that available. It is syndicated research that we have produced, but we do share that with our partners. So we encourage those that are interested in working with us to talk with me, talk with Jim, and be able to share some of that information in our insights. And I think it's important to do. We've learned a lot. We need to be able to share that appropriately.
Other questions from the board? So, question from the audience, and if you would identify yourself, please.
My name is Harry, retired PE, adjunct faculty of Boulder. The idea of recapturing and doing something with the CO2 has been around among technical people for decades. It was brought up on occasion, I've seen it brought up to utilities, and in those days there was no economical need for it, there was no pressing need for it due to regulation of EPA that were somewhat non-existent in those days, and so it didn't get its attention. So I have a lot of questions, but to keep it short, my first question is this: how far have you gone getting the PhD student studies involved from different universities? University of Wyoming had one of the best power departments at one time in the country. It has dwindled. University of Colorado had a good power department. It has dwindled. Power Engineering, IEEE magazine tells me you guys are hurting for good personnel. When I make a recommendation for one of my seniors that graduates with just 2 semesters, 6 credits of energy conversion classes, they get hired like that, okay? So my question to you is, have you really put in some money, and the money is relatively small that you put into PhD programs? Those students get paid very little compared to what all of you get paid. Very little money. And that's where innovative thinking always comes about. So that's my first question. The second one is probably rhetorical. You're going to say you have to educate the masses. How can you possibly educate the masses if the masses turn on their TV? They don't turn on the news. They turn on some show where one person kills another person, or some aliens kill people on this earth and vice versa. How are you going to educate them?
Two great questions. First, on the university side, from the beginning of this, as we've looked at potential partners, we have gone out to the research universities and their technology transfer offices to start, and have letters from 20-some different universities about working with us as this begins to really gel, to make sure that they are aware of these efforts, that they can reach into their research programs, their IP, and find those linkages between us and the universities. It's critical as we begin to develop this network of interests. When I say we, I don't mean just TriState. It's a host of industry and other research organizations and others that we absolutely recognize that you've got to bring along the research universities. So early on, we reached out to the technology transfer offices, including both Wyoming and CU, and others across the country, to begin to have that dialogue. So as we move forward with different components of this, we expect to really kickstart that and make sure that's open. As far as the communication side of this, that's a tough one, because I don't think that people generally connect up all the issues that end up delivering power out of their light sockets. From a utility perspective solely, we do a very good job of keeping the lights on and doing it affordably. So energy issues are not first in mind for most folks. It's pocketbook issues, it's their own personal financial security and jobs. Those are the things that people generally care about. What we need to do is work with others that have a pipeline into different areas of society. In particular, on education with this initiative, we are looking at a partnership with a national network of science centers. Science centers have a tremendous network across this country that educate kids and adults on scientific issues and do that in a very creative and engaging way. Working both with our National Rural Electric Cooperative Association and with the National Network of Science Centers, we're looking at curriculum that we can produce to help educate children on energy and carbon in a very fair and upfront way. Be able to access our network of electric cooperatives, working with other partners that do have a great reach, trying to get this message out, and use all the technologies that are available today in social networking, paid and earned media, to be able to begin to show a different path. It's an uphill exercise, but one that I think that we've given some thought to, and we need a lot of partners and all of you to help to get those messages out.
Mr. Chairman, do you have another question?
Lee, just a couple of, maybe a comment and help augment your first answer and then a question for your second. The integrated test center that Wyoming approved to be for consideration included bays that were designed to be potential host bays for the XPrize competition, but also additional bays that would not be part of that initial competition that the university or industry might have access to outside of the program. So there's from Wyoming's perspective, it's not just the XPrize competition thing. It's actually looking at expanding and providing universities and some of these other organizations a place to work as well. The second one I wanted to ask you is, when we talk about communication and getting the message out to the masses, does the XPrize Foundation have any success in doing that? And what does some of their history look like as far as media impressions for some of the other XPrize competitions that are run?
The Ansari XPrize, which was Spaceship One, the first private trip into space, the number of impressions that they had was off the charts in the billions. They were able to recast people's notions of private access to space in a way that had never been done before. it was always presumed that access to space was in the realm of just a few governments with their capability. By offering up a modest prize of $10 million, they're able to stimulate more than $100 million worth of investment, a tremendous amount of attention from both the investment community and the public, which culminated in the live broadcast of their 2 launches to demonstrate this new technology, and it's led to Virgin Galactic now getting ready for paid travelers to go to space. So their brand, their value, in a lot of sense, is being able to communicate and inspire and be able to show a wide range of audiences the value of pursuing very difficult, very challenging, but very world-changing opportunities. I think that's their attraction with this proposal, is that it really does change the way people need to think about energy and environmental issues. It takes on a goal that perhaps people never thought was possible, or they never thought about, period. Their bread and butter is giving that visibility. So we're very optimistic that they will be able to help us and lead us in getting that message to the public, to policymakers, to regulators.
I'd just like to comment a little bit. I'm Frank Lawrence, University of Colorado. I was department chairman for over 17 years, and my problem was there was no way for an assistant professor to work in the power industry and do the kinds of things that it would take him to get promoted, etc. So if you're looking at how you bring about this change through being able to educate people on the issues that the industry has, it's going to take significant support to change the infrastructure in the universities so that there are ways for people to succeed, both students and faculty, to get where you need to go. So the kind of problems you've talked about, the kind that need support to come out beyond what's available from the federal government, because the competition level there is such, if you go to Science Foundation or NIH, your odds of getting money are 3 to 20%. I said more than once nationally, what would you say if I walked into class on the first day of class and said 80 to 97% of you flunking this course? How many students do you think I would have? So that's the kind of competition we're facing in getting support to work on the kind of problems you talk about. And I think industry and legislatures are in a position to change some of that. So anyway, that's just, I'd be interested in your comments as to what you think might be doable.
Well, I appreciate that, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. The hallmark of our efforts to date have really been working within industry, looking for those in the private sector that can help to move these initiatives forward and trying to be a catalyst for those potential investors, and then working with more regional, the state of Wyoming, working there where you can really see potential action, you see value, you see the ability to move. When you look at federal funding, when you look at grants, when you look at that type of work, it's difficult. And to date, the federal research programs have really been focused in on carbon capture and sequestration, a number of the technologies that don't have as expansive a view as I think we're seeing around the area of carbon utilization. So it's a tremendous value for industry to come forward, find the resources to do it, in appropriate cases make those resources available to the universities and their programs as you're trying to spur innovation and build that towards commercialization.
I'd suggest a target for Wyoming on this is you've got to start at the University of Wyoming. Can you make that the center where you're attracting the best students from around the world to come to Wyoming to work in this area? If you can put together a program that has that kind of strength and that kind of support the university, you have an opportunity to become one of the world centers in this area, and I think it's something you may want to think about.
And that's the aspiration for a lot of this, is really how do we help ourselves to change the way we look at things and sustain our economies in the end.
Any other questions? Well, Lee, thank you so much for coming. Your door is always open.